I felt like, cannabis has always belonged at music festivals. It's always been there. But to have it in a regulated setting where people could interact with the brand, I think everyone was gravitating towards it. So that was just fun to see.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to High Spirits. I'm Anna Ray Grabstein, and Ben, our favorite co host, is away for paternity leave. Best wishes to him and his family today. It's June 30th, 2026. It's episode 143. And today we're going to be talking to Eddie Brennan, CEO of New York's Heirloom. But before that, we have an incredibly special news update today, and we're going to be bringing on Laura Fogelman, Chief of Staff and Head of Strategic Communications at PAX, who was at yesterday's DEA hearing for day one, and she's going to give us the juice. So without further ado, let's bring on Laura. Hey, Laura, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah. So I just want to jump right in. How the heck did you end up at this DEA hearing yesterday, and what was it like?
Yeah. Well, funny story. I'm actually not in Virginia for work. I have family here and we came out to celebrate the holiday next weekend. But when the hearing got scheduled, it just felt like too historic of a moment to pass up. And I, wanted to be able to be in the room and just see firsthand how everything was unfolding. So, made the decision to show up at the DEA headquarters in Pentagon City yesterday, a little earlier than the hearing was ready to start, anticipating a big crowd, and was surprised to find a relatively small crowd, but a very interesting day of proceedings.
Tell us what Pentagon City is like.
Well, I didn't spend a lot of time poking around outside of the DEA kind of compound in and of itself, but I will say security is very tight, which was not unexpected for the DEA. I think there were about 25 of us total who showed up as observers, and we were all waiting in line starting at about 7:30 or 8 a.m. To be let in. They did a pretty intensive screening process. We had to go through metal detectors and, they took our real IDs and ran background checks. And then ultimately, our badges very clearly noted we required escorts throughout the building. So lots of security, escorts, phones had to be turned off for the entirety of the hearing, which was, big surprise for me. But yeah, they're obviously taking this very seriously. I think I was the only person there not in a navy blue suit, which was the uniform for the proceedings. But yeah, definitely a really just formal vibe to the hearing.
Yeah, and it's notable that only 25 people were there because often a hearing like this would be live streamed and it wasn't. And so not only was it not live streamed and accessible to people from home or from around the country and the world who were paying attention to this momentous moment, but there wasn't even recording allowed. So the notes that you shared with me and that we're going to talk through, you were taking those by hand, as were everyone else in the room, right?
Yeah, and I will say I have so much respect for all the reporters out there who are expert at taking hand notes. I took about 20 pages of notes, as did almost every observer there. I think we were all trying to, transcribe the conversation just to, preserve our own record of what was discussed. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised because in addition to not live streaming it, which I think is newsworthy in and of itself, all of the kind of folks invited to participate were all, opposition voices. And so I expected to see, a big turnout just given the national interest in the issue. And certainly SSDP and some others, had press conferences outside of the building, early in the morning. But the actual attendance itself was a lot smaller than I thought. There were probably only 25 observers in total, which was surprising. It's a big deal.
I think a lot of us have spent our careers fighting for reform and market access and would have liked to be there. And it's not easy to get to Arlington. And like you said, it's a holiday weekend. So it's a complicated time. But let's dive into what you saw, what you observed. And you shared two questions with me that was the lens that you were wearing going into the hearing. So why don't you tell us what those questions were and what you learned?
Yeah, sure. And I think, this is not going to sound dissimilar for most of the folks that are listening and from within the industry. But the two big questions I had going in and really wanted to get a lens on were, how strongly the government was truly going to defend rescheduling and really position themselves as a proponent of the change. And then secondly, what was the opposition strategy going to look like? Obviously, the way it's structured yesterday was the government day to present their case, and the opposition kind of they each have scheduled days to make their own arguments, but they had the opportunity for cross-examination of government witnesses yesterday. And so I was really interested to kind of see what questions were going to come up and what they were really prioritizing. So that was what I was interested in going into it. And I'll say I thought the government started really strong. I was pleasantly surprised by the case that they made in their opening statements and how clearly and methodically and precisely they really laid out the scope of these hearings, but also really defined what was not under discussion or up for debate in this, which was, everything from the fact that the OLC already ruled on the two-part test. And so that was not something that was, to be litigated. The fact that they weren't advocating for legalization. They were literally there to demonstrate that there was a currently accepted medical use for cannabis, which therefore, meant it could no longer be defined as Schedule One. So that was, a really, I think, strong place to start. And then um, the attorney for the DEA, James Schwartz, he had kind of an interesting moment toward the end of his opening remarks where he said, we're not here to say cannabis isn't dangerous. All controlled substances are dangerous. We're here to weigh basically the benefits with the risk and make a scheduling recommendation. And that was really the crux of what everyone was there to discuss.
And so the DEA had an opening statement. Was there opening statement from the opposition as well?
No, they'll have the opportunity for that on their scheduled days to kind of make their arguments.
Okay. And how long did the opening statement last?
They started at about 9:30 and went until about 10:45 with a 10-minute break in there. And then we actually had a long lunch. The opponents weren't ready to start their cross just yet. And so they started at 1 and went basically from 1 until 5, cross-examining the government's first witness.
Okay. But did the cross-examination started after the government was able to question the witness also, or
Oh,
how did
yeah,
it work?
sorry. The
Yeah.
government did their opening statement, and then they brought on Dr. Chaparino, who was their first
Okay.
witness, and his testimony went until about 10:45.
And I've read your notes and a few other folks' notes from some newsletters about what he said, and it sounds like he was really articulate and scientific. Tell us a little bit about what he had to say.
Sure. Dr. Chaparino is a very credentialed, experienced leader within the FDA. He has a strong scientific background. He, has a doctorate. He led the rescheduling exercise within FDA. So he has a lot of expertise specifically on the process that they undertook. I think it's important to note that he was there as a fact witness, not an expert witness. So the FDA had basically authorized him to testify on 3 specific things, and anything outside of those things under his TUI letter was, not fair game for the conversation. But he basically took everyone through the journey of the 10-month evaluation that the FDA did, and he explained the process, all of the data inputs, how they made determinations about various things, and ultimately what their findings were, all of which are, in that report and recommendation. But he was very, again, systematic in how he approached that. I found him to um, answer the questions in a very unemotional, informative, solid way. He wasn't, you know, coming across as communicating any point of view of his own. He really was just, educating everyone on what that 10-month journey had looked like.
Got it. And so I did receive some notes from Vicente Law Firm, who also had a law clerk in the room that was taking notes. And their notes on Dr. Chaparino, they said, a point at the center of the testimony, only a single currently accepted medical use is required for marijuana to come off Schedule 1. and that the FDA analysis identified 3, not 1, qualifying conditions, and that those conditions are anorexia associated with a medical condition, nausea and vomiting, and pain. So it sounds like they basically are saying that we have gone far beyond the one medical use, and we've identified multiple.
Yeah, and he did a really good job too of explaining, the way that these medical programs are operating in the states. There are about 15 different indications that cannabis is actually being used for, and they chose 7 of those and did a deep dive into it. And so when they came up with the 3 that they felt demonstrated medical use, they really had substantive evidence supporting those determinations.
Okay. Well, and so then what happened with the opposition? How did the opposition approach Dr. Chaparino, and what did you think of their arguments?
Sure. So yesterday we heard from 3 different folks within the opposition. We heard from David Evans of Indasa. We heard from Reed Smith of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And then we heard from Patrick Keneally of DUID Victim Voices. Sam was also in the room. They're starting their cross, or it's probably completed by now, but they did their cross this morning. The 3 folks we heard from, all very different styles, all very different groups, all very different issues were raised. David Evans, who went first, I think was the most colorful of all of them. And ultimately, I think his view that he was communicating through his cross examination was that he felt like the FDA, in his own words, had done a shoddy job and the whole thing should be thrown away. And so, what he was trying to do in his cross was highlight things that he didn't feel were included in the consideration that should have been. So, he brought up things like, why didn't you look at pregnant women as, a specific, uh, you know, demographic here? And Dr. Chaparino's response was, well, we looked at the population in totality, and certainly pregnant women are part of that. But for the purpose of this, all we were trying to establish was a currently accepted medical use. We weren't, this isn't a new drug approval. We don't need to go through all the same processes that you do in that context. So that was one thing he raised. As the conversation unfolded, it did get a little bit heated at times. There were a lot of objections from the DEA around scope of the questioning. And so what was supposed to be a 1-hour cross-examination ended up being a 2-hour cross-examination because there was so much conversation and back and forth around objections. We did see the judge getting a little bit frustrated at times, feeling like he was being talked over or not heard. So, ultimately, I thought he did a really good job continuing to reground the conversation and what it was intended to be. The second cross-examination with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was markedly different from the first. And he was actually much more focused on intoxicating hemp. If I were to kind of summarize the issue, he brought up a lot of questions that he was trying to understand around the nature of products that are out in the market and that he views as intoxicating or dangerous that weren't actually the subject of the FDA's review and evaluation, and trying to get clarity around that. And then the third cross-examination, the DUID victims, this is probably one of the more impassioned, I would say, of the 3, where there was a lot of concern that, in the last 3 years since the 2023 recommendation came out, there's been a lot of conversation in his environment with, families of victims who have, had tragic things happen, and cannabis has had, some sort of a role in the story. And so I think he was expressing a lot of concerns that those data sets had not been considered prior to the recommendation to reschedule cannabis. I wasn't surprised by any of it. I think for anyone who's been following the conversation, these were all of the concerns and objections that we often hear from, opposition to reform. And so, it was all, I think, pretty exciting.
Yeah, it actually is heartening to hear that the DEA was objecting, that the judge was engaged, all of these things. really point to that this is actually a real process that's unfolding. And some of us in the industry have been really wondering, like, is this going to be some sort of prohibition theater? Uh, and is the DEA going to actually stick up for Schedule 3 after really being on the other side of the issue for the past 50 years? And what I'm hearing from you is that there's potentially some optimism that the industry can have from what happened yesterday. Um, how are you thinking about it? I know you don't get to attend the rest of the days. You'll probably be getting ready for 4th of July with the family, but uh, was it useful to be there? And are you optimistic about where it's all going?
Yeah, I definitely left with a lot more optimism than I arrived with because to your point, I was really heartened to see. I mean, Lisa Mann from the DEA's office was practically on her feet the whole time, objecting to many of the questions that were asked in cross. She had a lot of concerns about things being outside of the scope of what Chaparino was allowed to testify on, and then also just the scope of the hearing. I will say for anyone who's been in the cannabis industry for a while, most of us are here because of how deeply we care about the movement and reform. And this is a historic moment, no matter how you look at it. And I wasn't able to attend, the last round of this hearing, but it was actually really great to be in the room and just see, this moment that we're in. And, I'm really hopeful that we see a positive result coming out of these hearings and action the DEA takes from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been great to hear your perspective and firsthand account. I feel very lucky to have had your voice today. So thank you so much. And I hope your
Thanks for having
trip
me.
to DC is amazing.
Appreciate it. Talk to you guys later.
Okay, guys, what do you think? That is incredible. So cool to hear that the DEA is objecting to the opposition and is actually putting a witness in front of the judge that has incredibly strong points to make. And yeah, I guess I'm feeling a lot better about this than I maybe was last week. We're going to move into the next part of our show, and it's going to be a whole new vibe. We are going to be talking with Eddie Brennan. Eddie Brennan is part of a multi generational New York Apple family, over 5 generations in upstate New York. And under his leadership at Beacon Skiff, his family business, the company has expanded into hemp and cannabis and has really taken the New York regulated cannabis market by storm. And I'm really excited to bring on Eddie and talk about his incredible story and this business they're building in New York. Welcome, Eddie Brennan.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Uh, did you stick around to hear about this DEA interview that we just had with Laura?
I did. Sounds like exciting things on the horizon. So yeah, always great to hear from somebody on the ground.
Totally. Well, really happy to have you here today. We're big fans of Heirloom at High Spirits. We talked to Mac about over a year ago, and this in some ways is a revisiting of an old story that some of our listeners have heard, but the company has been through an incredible growth trajectory, and I'm really excited to hear about it. But why don't you ground us and get us started with some background about you and the family business and how you guys transitioned from apples into cannabis?
Absolutely. So yeah, we're a 5 generation family business. So Mac is the president of Heirloom, and I'm the CEO and also president of Beacon Skiff. So I represent the 5th generation of our family business. So what I brought to the family business and our team brought to the family business is the cannabis side of the business, as long as the hard cider side of our business. But we're very proud to be a 1,000-acre apple orchard here in upstate New York. And we've gone through many challenges over the last 115 years. And this it's almost a statistical impossibility to make it to the 5th generation. So had to been so much innovation and change over the years to get to this point. And just amazing to think of all the years that have gone by, and just the boundaries we've had to push, and almost had a few extinction of events along the way.
Well, those extinction events seem like they're really far in the rearview mirror. Just before we went live this morning, I pulled a BDSA report on how Heirloom is doing in New York. And granted, this is retail data only from regulated cannabis. But in the last year, you guys did $75 million of retail sales in the state
Wow.
across over 4.4 million units. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, I can say we felt every one of those units. I think the team here has been working, day and night to get those out. But when you put that in perspective, it really is amazing to think of everything the team's accomplished, and in conjunction with us being a top 10 hard cider brand nationally, and everything going on the other side of the road. So there's so much happening, and we couldn't do it unless there were really passionate leaders here who really cared about the vision of the company and trying to push it forward. So just very exciting to see where we're at.
Well, so you mentioned you have a top 10 cider brand. So you guys are playing in both alcohol and cannabis. And it's interesting because alcohol has had its own struggles. The category in some ways is shrinking, while cannabis is growing. Um, but alcohol isn't faced with the same stigma that cannabis is. And you've been a
Right.
pretty loud proponent for sticking up for cannabis while still protecting the legacy and the origin of this old business that you have. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that's been like?
Yeah, I mean, our journey into cannabis was very, very intentional. I mean, 1911 saved what we say 1911 saved the family farm. So we had 1,000 acres of apple trees, and really selling apples to packing houses and grocery stores just unfortunately wasn't a profitable business anymore. So we had to find a way to create a new revenue stream. And we went through two really tough winters here that turned into really challenging springs where we almost lost the family business in the early 2000s. And 1911 and our journey into hard cider really gave us a vehicle to be able to sell these apples to our hard cider company and actually keep the trees going. So, 1911 was absolute necessity to keep the business going, and then you can say we kind of bet the family farm then on cannabis, but we it was a calculated bet. We saw in the data what was happening in other states that had legalized cannabis, and we saw the direct decline of what was happening in the alcohol business. So we saw cannabis somewhat as a threat to our growing hard cider business. And what we really loved about what we were seeing on the beverage side of the business specifically, was that cannabis beverages were being consumed at occasions that alcohol weren't always being consumed at. And so that was very intriguing to us, and we studied the category and really saw what was happening in it, and it was just an intriguing way for us to jump into it. And we wanted to create, control the supply chain like we did in the Apple business.
And so when you say control the supply chain, what does that mean to you guys today?
Yeah, so in the hard cider business, we're completely vertically integrated. So we grow the apples here. Everything is harvested here. We're trimming the trees, pressing the apples here, and fermenting here. And cannabis gave us similar opportunity to control that supply chain. We started with hemp, growing several acres of hemp for 3 years, and we knew that if we could control that supply chain, we could create quality and consistent products. And so we learned that in the hard cider business, that consistency and quality meant something to customers. And when we make hard cider here, not only are we using fresh apples, but we're actually picking the specific variety of apple that we're putting into every one of our hard ciders, whether it be a Honeycrisp hard cider, it's going to be 100% Honeycrisp apples, or our original, which is a blend of four very specific varieties. So we saw an opportunity to be able to do that in the cannabis side as well. And so today, this week we're actually planting 2 acres of cannabis on our farm, and we'll control that from planting all the way to finished product.
And so, as you guys have expanded into cannabis, you really are known for beverage. People know the Heirloom brand for these delicious THC infused ciders that you put out. And you're number one as a THC beverage in the regulated market in New York. But you
Right.
are also in the number one, number two, or number three spot in almost every other category. And vapes are your leading category. You're super
Right.
high up in the rankings with gummies and pre-rolls and even tinctures, which was interesting to see. And you clearly are an ambitious guy. You've taken this family business that was the legacy of apple farming, faced with challenges, figured out
Right.
how to create a cider business off the back of it, expanded into the regulated cannabis and into the hemp opportunity, while the door was open, is open. Uh, I can't imagine that New York is the end of your ambitions. Like, how are you seeing the rest of the market? So many companies, once they reach the scale that you guys have, or even at a quarter of your size, have decided to take on a multi-state approach and go into other
Right.
markets. I imagine you must be thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think, when Mac and I were talking about this a year ago, our multi-state strategy was really hemp-derived THC beverages, and we've seen things changing regulatory wise with that. Shocker, things are always changing in this category. But I think getting to the scale we're at in New York, we want to be very intentional and careful to not just run out of New York State without a real plan. And I think, as we talk about it as a team and as a leadership team today, we still think there's a lot of room for growth in New York State. There's a lot of room for us to continue to go deep. And we learned so many lessons from the alcohol business about distribution, about our supply chain, about how we manufacture and go to market. And I think Mac and the team have built a best in class sales team that really has a great way of communicating to the dispensary owners, and also ultimately communicating with the customers. So we see still 1 to 3 years of great runway in New York State for us to continue to grow. That being said, I think us continuing to look outside of New York regionally is definitely something we're talking about. I don't know that we have a well built out plan to roll that out today, but something we're definitely talking about. And if you'd asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I'd say, well, people don't really know. People aren't going to know what Heirloom is. They're not going to care about it. But today, I think very differently about that. I think the name Heirloom means something to customers, and I know when they grab our products, not only are they trying it, but they're coming back, week after week to purchase the products, because I think, it's safe cannabis, but also it's a lot of the products we're making are effect based, and the customers are enjoying those effects. And when we created Heirloom originally, we wanted to be a very approachable brand. I think so many customers who go into dispensaries today are so overwhelmed when they walk into a store. We wanted to tell people exactly what it is when they're purchasing it, whether that be a vape or a beverage.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you did a bunch of studying of data before you guys got into cannabis, and that you also visited other operators. I want to talk about that a little bit and what it meant to create sort of best in class um, operation, because you've talked a
Right.
lot about the team behind you. I have met on multiple occasions your COO, Brianna Cortez, who has an incredible background and seems like just a super impressive
Yeah, she's
operator.
incredible.
Everyone from the team is just like focused on efficiency and quality. And I'm wondering where that comes from. Is it that you saw it in another company? Is it that you have a certain philosophy of the way that you're approaching it? Who do you think is doing it the best? And who are you guys trying to emulate in your path to be a best in class operator?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I would say that Brianna and Matt Huber are just incredible leaders, and they have such great vision. Um, I would say we actually didn't learn specifically from the cannabis industry. I think when we got out and looked at operators in the cannabis industry, we learned that everybody was forced to operate within their states, and with that, a lot of distribution challenges came up, a lot of supply chain risk came up. When we really started to dive into the space, we took a lot of lessons from the alcohol industry, and I think if you look at a lot of the team members currently at Heirloom, the majority of them aren't going to be transplants from the cannabis industry. They're going to be people who worked at Anheuser-Busch in a leadership role. They're going to be somebody who maybe worked for a CPG company, like a Procter and Gamble, or one of the bigger companies. Because in those companies, you're forced to vision set, look ahead, but also looking at your supply chain and understanding how to build a quality supply chain, and that always wasn't being done in the cannabis industry. I'll also say on the hard cider side of our business, we had 15 years to make mistakes and iterate and learn as a team, and a lot of the leadership team that's over at Heirloom today are people that were in our hard cider business on the Beacon Skip side, who got to cut their teeth over here. And when we built the original hard cider facility here, we made so many mistakes. We put the labeler uh, after the bottle filler, and the labels didn't stick. I could think of 15 examples like that. So everything from our flavor development, Jan Fay, who's our head of beverage development here, sits over all of our companies. So not only is he developing the Heirloom beverages, but he created every single 1911 beverage that's ever been produced here, as well as Heirloom. So a lot of crossover, and I think ultimately it's all about quality and consistency, and that starts with the ingredients and then the people that are making them on a daily basis. But the one word I think about when I think of our team is just passionate, passion, and that's something you can't teach, and that's ultimately what we look for here.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jan, and you mentioned that you have focused on creating a moods line with minor cannabinoids and terpenes. I'm wondering if you could talk us through what a new product process looks like at Heirloom, and if you guys, if that is something that is a repetitive process or it's different every time, how something hits the market.
Yeah. So originally, 5 years ago, I would say the product wasn't the process was not as fleshed out as it is today. There were a lot of close calls because we do testing with hemp. We weren't using THC at the time, so we'd be using CBD. I will say I overdosed myself on CBD multiple occasions where I had over 100 milligrams and came back to my office sleepy. But today we started on the hard cider side of our business, and we did weekly tasting panels, and we always try to keep the group consistent on who was tasting it. And I go back to 12 years ago when we created 1911 Cider Donut, which is is our best selling hard cider, seasonal hard cider today. And every hard cider company in the country now carries a cider donut. And back then, Jan Fay and we were just mixing things in the lab and trying to create the flavors. When I look back on that, we landed on something, but it was hard to figure out how we got there. And today we're much more intentional. If we're creating a new vape product or a new gummy, we're starting. Jan and the team, everyone's creating the actual flavor, and then we distribute it to our employees here. So we have a group of over 50 employees who get samples, and then we have a QR code with a detailed questionnaire of exactly the things that you're tasting. And so, we then meet after everybody's tried the products. So we try to have that consistent feedback from our employees, who we also see as our consumers on a daily basis. But yeah, it's certainly a fun process, and one if you had told me we were going to do 20 years ago, I would have been shaking my head.
Yeah. And you talked about the growth that you continue to believe is in New York. What's your take on the state of the market in New York today? There's tons of brands. As someone that came up in California cannabis myself, I look at what's happening in New York and I wonder how many of those brands will still be around in a couple years. What's your take on how people are faring in the state overall?
Yeah, well, I'd say there's a lot of labels on the shelf in New York City. I'm not sure how many brands there are necessarily. Everybody wants to play in New York, and New York. I think one of the challenges for New York operators is everyone can come to New York and afford to lose money, right? Because you need to plant your flag in New York State. You want to get in front of as many customers as you can. But I think it comes when you pull brands off the shelf, whether it be New York or other market, the story behind those brands can be lacking. And I think when you look at the data, you look at a Little Earths or a BDSA and look at the brands that are winning in New York State, it's a lot of local New York brands. And I'm not sure how, I'm sure that happens in other states as well, but it's been really amazing to see the New York brands winning on the shelf. And some of that is the way the regulatory was structured in New York, and they did a great job of setting up the market. But I think it's a challenging market to break into for sure. And we have a robust sales team, and we're always out there, building relationships with the dispensaries. And customers are discerning, and I think more and more they're picking brands off the shelf, and they're actually want to see what the story is. And what's been really neat about Heirloom is like people actually connecting Heirloom to Beacon Stiff and then to 1911, making that connection on, well, I've tried this product, I've actually been to the farm, and maybe I've had a hard cider, and that's been amazing. But
How have you guys done that with the restrictions on marketing? How is that story filtering down?
yeah, I think it's more of an organic connection customers are making. One great thing we just did recently was we had Heirloom at Governor's Ball, which is one of the music festivals in New York City that happened last month, and we were the first cannabis beverage or cannabis brand that had been featured at their music festival. And one of the coolest things was we had the installation set up, and just having customers come and interact with the brand and then actually be able to consume Heirloom on site. And, we could only sell the 1 milligram beverage for the New York State regulations, but having people connect with it. I mean, I felt like, cannabis has always belonged at music festivals. It's always been there. But to have it in a regulated setting where people could interact with the brand, I think everyone was gravitating towards it. So that was just fun to see. And then I think people put the pieces together. Or if you come to a concert at Beacon Skiff, I think last week we had Dustin Lynch here for a country show, and we have an Heirloom van set up there, and so people can come see the brand there and interact with our brand development team. So we try to meet customers in those moments where it's more of an organic feel that, oh, I'm at an apple orchard, and of course cannabis belongs here. So that's been fun.
In both of those scenarios that you described, are those your hemp beverages that were being sold? Because you can't sell the
Right.
regulated cannabis ones, right?
Yeah. I mean, that is our hemp derived THC beverage. And New York State's a little tricky because you can only go as high as 1 milligram.
Hmm.
So it's, yeah, you have to drink, you can have to drink a few of them to get the feeling of a 5 or 10 milligram beverage, but it's more a proof of concept and a way for us to just, sample to customers on here's what it tastes like. And then, we can point them in the direction of a dispensary uh,
Yeah.
down the road.
Well, you're kind of opening the door to talk about hemp a little bit. And I think it's interesting because there's so many hemp beverage brands right now that are really grappling with the future, not knowing what's going to happen, if the November ban is going to hold or not. You guys have
Right.
built a real business in regulated, both with beverage and other form factors. And I think that there are varying perspectives from the hemp beverage brands that I've spoken to about if there's really a business opportunity for them in regulated cannabis, because the dispensary is not necessarily the best channel to be finding, acquiring these types of products.
Right.
But you guys are doing okay at it, and I'm wondering what your take is on that decision process for these hemp beverage companies right now that aren't in regulated cannabis. Should they be looking at regulated cannabis? Any advice for those folks that are grappling with what to do next?
Yeah. I mean, regulated cannabis is so tricky. And that was the beauty of hemp beverages, right? You could ship it across state lines. You could anchor your manufacturing in one facility and then ship to multi-states. And I think the challenge with retrenching and going to, back to the adult use market for these brands is you have to set up you have to build partnerships in each state with manufacturing facilities. And that would be a challenge. And I totally agree with you. Dispensaries are not the best place for customers to be buying beverages. That being said, I would say what we've noticed in dispensaries in New York is it's an incremental purchase, it's an add-on. And dispensary owners are really open to carrying beverages because they really see it as that. But we did build a robust hemp uh, business. At one point we were in 13 states, and every week it seems, even before the challenges that are going to happen in November, every state it seems like it's just whack-a-mole, with different regulations. But this is a tough moment, I think, for the hemp beverage industry. And my take on it is whether or not it goes away in November, and I'm becoming increasingly less optimistic. I think it's the cat's out of the bag, and I'm hopeful that if it does come back, it comes back with real regulations. That some type of a level playing field for everyone. I think these, going into, I was in a store in New Jersey last week, and there's 100 milligram beverages on the shelf, and they not only are they on the shelf, but they're selling really well, and people are grabbing them. And so, I wonder what will happen to those operators, because even in a New York regulated market, that's not a dosage that you can sell here. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely tough. I think when we built Heirloom originally, we built it as an adult use brand, and then expanded into hemp to some degree. But the core of our business was adult use, and it was a major risk to build, a $5+ million canning line, without a license, and anchor it in New York State with the conviction to believe that beverages did belong in adult use dispensaries.
sure. Well, so within this just constant back and forth with regulations on hemp, and you've been navigating New York, which took years to work out what the market was going to look like, how the structure would work. From a leadership
Right.
perspective, as you've been navigating growing this business, kind of figuring out how to execute on your own ambitions and aspirations, what have been some of the biggest leadership struggles that you've had on that journey?
I think when you look at a business that went from zero to $75 million at retail, happening in a 3 to 4 year window, and then you contrast that with our Beacon Skiff 1911 business that we're in our 115th year, and Heirloom this year will do 30% more in sales, 30%, at least 30% more in sales, um, than our that business. It really puts it in perspective. And so many of those step ups in revenue, things break, whether it's within your manufacturing facility or growing with people. I would say Mac and Brown and the team have done such a great job, just challenging the status quo and continuing to look outside the company to bring in best in class leaders, and they've done such a good job at that. But uh, it's the other major challenge is, we had to set Heirloom up as a separate company on our farm. So we literally, from like selling the parcel of land it operates on, all the way to building it as a separate entity. That's been a real challenge to make sure we keep everything clean, separate employees, separate bank accounts, and that has created some challenges at times with the teams. But I'm ultimately just really, really proud of what everybody's accomplished in just continuing to challenge the status quo, and make sure that we're continuing to look at ways that we could go out of business, and then push back against that and find ways for us to survive, and ultimately try to find a way to a sixth generation.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking. You mentioned the big investment that you made in the bottling line and the canning line, and I know that that was funded by the company itself, not a lot of outside investors. A lot of
Right.
cannabis companies have these big aspirations of public market listings. Every day we're hearing about a new company that's working to try to uplist onto an American exchange. There's
Yeah,
so much
sure.
M&A that's going on in 2026 as a result of this maturation of the industry. What is the long vision here? Are you trying to build this for the family? Do you see something beyond that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. When I look at the businesses here, I see everything as one, even though Heirloom is separate. Um, and when you live and grow up on a 1,000 acre apple orchard, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And when you're ultimately the fifth generation leader of that business, you have to make you have to look out ahead to see what the future can bring in today. I think that potential sixth generation is young. That my daughters are 10 and 12, but I feel a lot of responsibility to lead, and ultimately make my grandparents, who are no longer alive, proud of what the legacy of our business can be. And I think a lot of business leaders aren't in that position. I had two really incredible grandfathers. I had Marshall Skiff, who worked on the land here at Beacon Skiff. He was our third generation leader. Loved the apple trees. He actually called weed evil weed at times, because I think he didn't understand the benefits of it. And then I had another grandfather, Ed Brennan, who I'm named after, and he's my dad's father, and he ran Sears in the '90s. So he was a a visionary in the retail landscape. And so I learned so much from both of them. But ultimately, I represent my grandpa Stiff's legacy here at Beacon Skiff, and so I'm so proud. And that comes with a lot of uh, challenges. We when I got here, I realized that the apple trees weren't going to sustain our business, and so it's called for some challenges. But Heirloom I see as this amazing growth vehicle. But I think ultimately, down the road, who knows what will happen. But today we're trying to build it for that next generation and trying to continue the legacy here.
Awesome. Um, are there any big, hairy aspirations that we haven't talked about? Things that you're excited about in the coming year?
Yeah, well, I couldn't be more excited about cannabis beverage, and I know everybody gets excited about cannabis beverages, and I think we're in a bit of a challenging moment right now with the category and a lot of uncertainty. And I'd just like to say that I think ultimately this is all going to get worked out. And I know you'd say, "Oh, that's easy for you to say. You're the leading brand in New York, and you understand your distribution, you have your brands." But um, I think customers. The one thing I see today is customers aren't aware about what's about to happen, and the customers love the category. And the great thing I've seen with cannabis beverages is, whether it's my mom or someone's grandma drinking it, or a cancer patient drinking it. So many, it's just this wide scope of people, and cannabis is the great destigmatizer in our industry. And I really believe that cannabis, more than any other form factor, is the one that is going to continue to push the category forward. And I think it has in a lot of ways. I just think we've gotten into this clouded environment, where, people have maybe pushed it a little too far, and the lack of regulation has created a lot of uncertainty. So, but I remain very hopeful that, big alcohol has taken notice as a large alcohol operator in New York State. I can tell you they have, because I go to the Brewers Association meetings and the Cider Association meetings, and it's a major topic. Everybody's talking about either they want to get into the category or they want to understand what's happening in the category. So very, very optimistic. What it looks like in the future, I can't tell you, but I know ultimately if there's a pull from consumers, we'll figure it out.
Hmm, that is hopeful. I like it.
Yeah.
Uh, well, Eddie, I think it's time for our last call. And that's our final message for our listeners: advice, call to action, or closing thought.
Well, I'd say, you know, today people get very caught up in the regulatory landscape and things changing on a daily basis. I kind of come at things from a different perspective. We're an operator here who has been forced to change for our business to survive. And what that's allowed us to do is be laser focused on what matters. And for us, what matters is the preservation of our land here and making sure everything we produce is quality and consistency. And I think if everybody would make sure everything they're making focuses on that quality and consistency, um, the consumer will win. And ultimately, that's what's going to push our industry forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. It's really, really cool to hear about what Heirloom is up to.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What'd you think, folks? Pretty cool what Heirloom is doing. I think you can go and check out the farm in upstate New York. They've got concerts and stuff all summer. Uh, Definitely try to get there. It's far, but I think it might be worth it. But thank you to our teams at Vertosa and Wolf Meyer, and to our producer, Eric Rossetti, and tons of love to Ben and his family as they're going through this sweet time with the brand new baby at home. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, review, do all the things wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening. As always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep your spirits high. That's our show.